This is part 2 of Bill McGrath's presentation on his grandfather, James E. McGrath, who the city of McGrath was named after, his presentation that he gave in his local area some time back. So this is part 2.
But because the town was on hard times and my grandfather was probably feeling the loss of a lot of money, we had a lake cabin in our family, and I used to hear about this when I was a kid, that our family had a lake cabin up by Danbury, Wisconsin. But we didn't have it anymore, and I didn't really get the picture of what happened to that cabin until about 10 years ago. An elderly relative told me that when my grandfather was up in years, he had false teeth, and one day he lost his false teeth, and in order to get another set of false teeth, he gave the lake cabin to the dentist. So here he is, and this might be the last picture that I have found of my grandfather, and these are 3 of his kids. He had 6 kids altogether. Now Emma had died by this point. So we have Pauline, this is my father, and this is Aunt Helen. Aunt Helen probably has put forth most information about her father. So my father married my mother and went off to World War II and came back, and they were able to move back into the mansion. The mansion had been almost vacant during a lot of the 1930s and into the 1940s. And it needed a roof, it needed a furnace, it had broken windows, and my father never made much money. He worked for Negri billboards, selling advertising. He also sold advertising. Remember when you'd go to the movies and they would have those ads before the movie for the drugstore and all this kind of stuff? He sold that kind of advertising. He worked for his own brother, who was the city attorney of Stillwater, and towards the end of his life, he worked for the Minnesota State Income Tax, which would not be fun. He was a collection agent. I'd take the North Woods any day over that. So here's a very recent picture. This is myself and my brother Jim, who's sitting 15 feet over there. We might hear from Jim later on. We were just hanging out there, but it's still a beautiful old house. And like I said, the current owner of the house is with us tonight. They might say a few words too. But, so you all came here tonight to find out, where did the money go? And I wish I could answer that, but I can give you some guesses. The pines were getting scarce. So all of the lumber industry in Stillwater pretty much shrank down. And with no more money coming in, all you've really got is a lot of expenses. He would not have even probably Social Security or anything, because of those times. Another way that the money went away, these regulations we talked about, due to the fires, where they started all those restrictions. In other words, telling the lumber barons, no, you cannot cut down these trees, number one, or if you are going to cut down these trees, you've got to spend a bunch of money to clean up afterwards. So dollars per tree would tend to, not be as profitable. Income tax, which we all like, that would have changed his life quite a bit, and he was right about at his peak when they started that tax. Another thing, he had put money into college for his kids. And then, of course, the big one, the loss of the mill itself, He probably lost money in 1929. The house was eating him alive, probably. It was largely empty. I think at one point it was my grandfather and my father living there alone, just the two of them, with how many bedrooms is there? 7 or something? So big upkeep. But they kept on, they hung on to it. In fact, that house was in our family for 64 years. And it was pretty thin living towards the end, but we did stay there. And then 5 of the kids gave money to the youngest, who was my father, in order to help hang on to the mansion. So if anybody knows of some other reasons why my grandfather's money is no longer around, let me know. But these are the ones that I've come up with so far. Not very scientifically, but from things I've heard. And whatever happened to this guy? He was 79 years old in 1939, June. He was still involved in the lumber industry, and he still owned some lumber land up east of Mille Lacs Lake, near McGrath, Minnesota. So on a hot summer morning, my grandfather and my father were looking at some land northwest of McGrath, Minnesota, and my grandfather told my dad, he said, "You wait here, I'm going to walk up this road, and I'll be back in just a little bit." And he went up this old logging road, which winds around, you kind of lose track of people pretty quick, and he never came back. And my father, of course, became alarmed and went to find help to look for his father. And it resulted in 12 days of searching by hundreds of people. There were several National Guard units called in. They brought special bloodhounds from New Ulm and other special bloodhounds from La Crosse. They brought in the Conservation Civilian Corps, the CCC, and lots of local people were looking for him. And about that time, the old-timers said, "He's not lost, he's dead. He would never get lost in the woods." So they looked for 12 days, and then they called off the search, and then one of the National Guard units asked for permission from the sheriff to resume the search, and they went and they looked in a really unexpected area that was on the other side of the road, and it was some distance away, and that's where they found him. He was lying against a tree, and his compass was lying on the ground, and the St. Paul Pioneer Press reported that the compass was not in working order. Now, I have no way of knowing now what exactly they mean by that. Did he drop it or what? But it sounds like my grandfather, who knew the woods better than anybody probably, may have actually gotten lost and had a heart attack and died. So that was the end of that era, and he was the last one. Now, a couple of things to think about. Getting back to the native people and that treaty of 1837, did his lumber activity harm the Ojibwe? Was he preventing them from hunting or gathering or fishing? I don't know, but it's something to think about. I don't think that anybody can blame my grandfather for whether the Ojibwe received the money that they were supposed to get, because that was up to the federal government, and it was 70 years prior to my grandfather anyway. So the second thing here, did he actively lobby against the establishment of the township fire marshals? I know that there were lumber barons that were coming to the state capitol and trying to get rid of this guy. His name was Andrews, C.C. Andrews. He was the first of the fire marshals for Minnesota. There's a state forest named after him. So they wanted to get rid of him. So it was very controversial for about 15 years up there, and my grandfather might have been involved in that. I don't know whether he was. And the final one, of course, did he burn down his own sawmill? He was acquitted in court. He was reputed to be an honest man. I'd love to know the answer to some of these questions. So, we moved out of the house in 1964. Several families have owned it since then. And when you get to be my age, I'm 69, you look back and say, what do I have that came from my ancestors? And really, the only thing that I have right now that I know for a fact actually belonged to my grandfather is this. So the moral of the story, which is not unique to the McGrath family at all, there's a book by Anton Chekhov, a Russian guy. The Cherry Orchard is about an aristocratic family that is losing all their money. House of the Seven Gables is kind of the same theme. But I'll just leave you with this. Can we have the lights? Thank you.